Hello, and welcome to Templar On The Run, the podcast pulling back the veil of Freemasonry and shining its light wherever we can. This is Brother Bryce Baker with
Brother Wayne Ross, and we are both from Meridian 47 in Meridian, Idaho. Thank you for your interest in the world's oldest fraternity.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Templar On The Run podcast. It's been a bit, but I'm glad to be back. This is Brother Bryce here with
Brother Wayne, and yes, I'm glad you're back too. Having to hold down the fort by myself last week. It wasn't bad, but I prefer to have somebody else as well, especially with all this technical stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But you're feeling better?
Yeah,
okay.
Feeling better, back to it.
Not contagious?
No.
Okay, perfect, good. So today we've got a special guest with us, brother I've known since I've been in Masonry here, and he's got a long history with us in the fraternity in various aspects. Brother Barry Newell, if you'd like to introduce yourself here to our 100 and some odd followers.
My name is Barry Newell. I'm a past master of Oriental Lodge number 60. I'm a member of the Boise Valley, the Scottish Rite, for going on 13 years now. A member of the York Rite, where I've served as a Grand High Priest of the Royal Arch Masons and Grand Master of Cryptic Masons, and I'm currently the Deputy Grand Commander of Knights Templar for the state of Idaho. And then I'm in a whole long list of other groups. We won't go into that; it'd take us all day.
Well, glad to have you, and yeah, you definitely have a huge Masonic background, and then you're also the traveling Templar, right? So you kind of fit right in.
Yep. So I started that blog, and that's kind of chronicled my educational history as well as my chronological history in Masonry and my travels throughout the world.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we get a couple of creative titles between Traveling Templar and Templar on the Run.
That's right.
Mesh the video and the audio together there. So.
There we go. Figure something out.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of things we really wanted to hit on. This would be our first opportunity. We've had some brothers in. Notably, we had brothers Rob Mahar and Chad Brown in after the day of the 33rd that they did just a couple weeks back.
Okay.
So they came in after that. They were a little bit spent, but it was a good thing. So we've hit some areas in there. We've touched a little York Rite, and we're going to do much more with that. We touched a little Shrine with Brother Rick Bobeer in the early episodes, and then we've also gone off. We've talked to the Reverend from the St. Michael's Episcopal Church. We've had the church right next to us at the lodge here in Meridian. We've had a Buddhist friend in here. We've been talking about all these other things of connections, and that's our big key.
Yeah.
And at times too, like the previous one from last week with our newest entered apprentice, just sort of breaking down some stuff, and we're following his journey. So after we do his second, we'll get together on that and do that. But one of the main pieces, I think, especially with your background, would be your workings with the Rosicrucians. Mm-hmm. And that's really like a lot of our interest to sort of get that information out. And because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, first of all, with that order and how it's organized and when it began and everything like that.
Yeah, and to kind of get us started maybe on that conversation, I got this book sent to me here by my mom. She recently went to Rosslyn Chapel.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to read just like a little paragraph or two that they have about the Rosicrucians. Mm-hmm. And then kind of get your take on that, and then maybe like fill in the gaps or let us know what you think. So, during the late Middle Ages, throughout the same wide network of operative guilds, companies, and orders, there spread a belief in the existence of enlightened ones. These obscure Rosicrucians traveled the highways of Europe in disguise and might fall in with some unsuspecting journeymen, or so it was believed. Mysterious Rosicrucians were said to be bound by oaths of impenetrable secrecy and to labor towards pure knowledge and the preservation of human life by means of the healing art. These hidden masters were said to be known by name only to the innermost adepts of the mystery traditions and to the great and good rulers of society who protected them. The medieval Rosicrucian fraternity is often viewed as being a body of learned and scientifically advanced alchemists. It is probable that some such underground body did exist during the 14th century. It is even possible that the designation Rose Croix resulted from the abolished Red Cross symbolism of the Templar Order. Destroyed in 1307, hundreds of members of the once vast and widespread order had simply gone into hiding. The official penalty for aiding a fugitive Templar was excommunication. Cartographers, navigators, doctors, and learned clerics, amongst armorers and knights, had all fled arrest in almost every country in Europe. The impact on the guilds of a wave of unemployed professional and highly skilled intellectuals, all of whom had suffered at the hands of the church and state, should not be underestimated.
I hadn't read that one before. But it touches on some interesting points. There's a lot of theories into how Rosicrucianism started. What we do know as a hard date is in the 1600s, in 1614, 15, and 16, there were 3 publications. The Fama Fraternitatis, the Confessio Fraternitatis, and the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz were published, all in Germany. And they spoke of a secret brotherhood of secret initiates that have essentially gathered and collected knowledge over the centuries and were charged to keep it secret for a time and then release it out to the learned of Europe. And there are a ton of theories. I've read one theory that Christian Rosenkreuz, the legendary founder, was actually a Cathar that survived the Albigensian Crusade. I've read that they came from the Templars. There's one theory that they stem from Ormus, which was a Gnostic from Alexandria back in the time of Christ. And there's a lot of theories they're very fanciful. It's hard to pin it down because there's so much missing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, each of these 3 documents are the legendary, start the founding, and really they speak to the time in which they were, because you have to look at what was happening in Germany at the time. A century had gone by since the Reformation started. So Catholicism is in upheaval, Protestantism is spreading. And we know for sure the last document was written by a Protestant theologian. And many of them think that either him or even Francis Bacon actually penned some of these. And but they were speaking to the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, because everyone was vying for who would have control of the Holy Roman Empire. Would it be Catholicism? Would it be Protestantism? And Protestantism was splintering into every different, Quakers, Calvins, Huguenots. And really, it was a huge and stable time, because shortly after that was the 100 Years' War.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually how Rosicrucianism really spread. Because these pamphlets, they were circulated really heavily, and Thomas Vaughan in England was the first one to print it in English, because most of these were all in German when they were written. But I think the 100 Years' War really spread it, because you have to think, these massive armies spreading, chaos everywhere. People are scattering and fleeing. Well, where did they go? They went to England.
Right.
And that's where our order, the Societas Rosicruciana and Cibitatibus Foederatis, which is the Rosicrucian Society of the United States, we were founded by the Scottish Rosicrucian Society, who also helped found the one in England. And between 100-Year War and then are a few centuries, because that was 1600s and we're talking 1800s when we were established. In the 1700s, you see some obscure Rosicrucian societies. One of them, the Gold und Rosenkreuz, the Golden Rosy Cross, actually has degrees very similar to what we use in the SRICF. We're composed of 9 grades or degrees, and we use Zeloter, Theoricus, Practicus, and Philosophus for the first 4 that compose the first order, then Adeptus Minor, Adeptus Major, and Adeptus Exemptus. which compose the second order, and then we have Magister and Magus as our 8th and 9th, and that's the third order. In the 17th century order, the Golden Rosicrucians, is the only real difference I saw was Zealotr was junior, and that was the difference. So I think there are some similarities, but you still see all these breaks because they dip and they rise and fall really rapidly, especially in the upheaval of, you're also seeing the French Revolution, the establishment of the German state around, in the 1800s. And so I think a lot of people fled from the 100 Years' War, and we know some of them did, because that's how we know some of them met John Dee, Francis Bacon, Thomas Vaughan, a lot of guys that helped establish the Royal Society, the Invisible College in England, which is also what they say the Rosicrucians are. It was an invisible college.
So yeah, we've been talking about Bacon for a while, and we'll definitely get to that, but so some clarification pieces a little bit, especially because our audience varies so widely.
Yeah.
We've even got people all over the globe who listen in, which is awesome, but non-Masons, Masons, etc., so on and so forth. And so when we're talking time periods, verifiable time periods, and then not being a member, but being a member, all of us being members of Scottish Rite, we recognize a lot of the names and the symbols and the Red Cross. So who came first, right? So we know Pike's writing that later, so this stuff is verified earlier. So how much confusion is there for you? Because even OTO, they have a lot of their degrees very similar to Scottish Rite degrees, which sound very similar to Rosicrucians.
Right.
So when you're trying to explain this, where do you draw hard lines and say, this is not this, but this is this? You have to be a Mason. Right. We line that out. So
you have groups, you have like Mathers and Yarker and Theodore Russell and a few others that were members of the SRIA, so the Societas Rosicruciana in England, who helped start things like the Golden Dawn, who also you had some influence with some of their members also then joined with Blavatsky and helped establish the OTO. So you can see there is a heritage and stuff that some of them took this Rosicrucian beliefs and then mixed it with Eastern, and there was already Eastern mysticism with Rosicrucianism because Rosencreutz visited the Middle East and got a lot of that knowledge before coming back into Western Europe.
Unavoidable. Yeah.
Right. But they took it even further to mix it with more Buddhist, Jainist, and beliefs. And so you can see that Rosicrucianism stemmed a lot of societies. And I could show you, I have an article on my website called The Rose Line, and I talk about all the different groups that kind of involve Rosicrucianism throughout the years. And there's tons.
That would be an excellent link, I think, on ours when we put this out too as well, because it's just so much, and if somebody's thinking about it, we always ask about that and those first steps. But it's just this huge umbrella. So to have, that line of communication, and I assume that's also why you started with your site with Traveling Templar. Was a lot of that, right?
Yeah. So I was actually high priest of my Royal Arch chapter, which is like the worshipful master of a lodge, and I started doing research, and I said, I'm writing all these papers to myself. And I said, why not share it? And so then I started publishing just a few things here and there, and then when I was in Iraq about a year later, I had a lot more free time when I was not at work, so I started publishing a lot of different things. And then when I came home, I exploded. End of 2011 into 2012, I just started publishing everything I could, get my hand, like any topic I could find. And I was writing about groups that most people hadn't heard of or were very obscure, that I wasn't even a member of at that time. And some people actually ask, are they mad? I'm like, no, there's probably a few that don't like that I'm writing stuff. But most are reaching out, going, hey, can I borrow this? To include, I've had somebody from the Sovereign Great Priory of Canada, Knights Templar, were like, hey, we want to borrow this. I'm like, go for it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so I kept up with it. I had a hiccup about a year and a half ago. The site that ran my domain, they crashed. So all the DNSs stopped working, and then even Blogspot started like acting up. And so I had to like recreate a bunch of stuff. I mean, everything went down. I was like, I thought about actually stopping for a while, and then a bunch of people were like, don't, keep going. And so now I've been writing. I don't write as many as I used to, but I write usually longer, or break them up into several parts, into more in-depth esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, like, even back then, I wasn't, when I started the blog, I wasn't Scottish Rite. I was York Rite, and that was it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Rosicrucianism in the York Rite. People just don't realize it, especially in the main body. The Royal Arch has some. I mean, the Triple Tau is a red cross. It's 3 red crosses all joined together.
Yeah.
But we have the illustrious Order of the Red Cross, and then obviously the Knights Templar. Were known for their red crosses, and so that's where I started really mining for information. Was looking at like, okay, Scottish Rite is very blatant and obvious with its philosophical teachings. York Rite's more historical. There has to be little gems in there, and there were tons.
Yeah.
And so I just started digging through everything.
That's funny. It's kind of like the opposite of my journey, because I went through the Scottish Rite first, and then just through like studying that more and more, and then getting like the philosophical side to it, I kind of learned that like, okay, so like a lot of our founding fathers were also York Rite, right? And that's where I kind of picked up and started my York Rite journey. I'm still going through the degrees, but it's definitely been a benefit. Like I really enjoy it, but I'm also a Masonic nerd, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to look at the relationship. I mean, for in a lot of early years, York Rite was the top dog, versus now you see Scottish Rite is obviously the more popular, or perceived to be more popular, and it really depends on where you're at. But they complement each other. That's one thing I really like about them. And one of the reasons I went through York Rite first was there was a lot of guys in my lodge that I looked up to. If you remember Ron Burdo, Art Shoemaker, past Grandmaster, a lot of these guys I saw in my lodge ahead of me and stuff were the most involved, most active in my lodge, were heavily Scottish, or heavily York Rite. We also had a lot of heavy Scottish Rite. We have Bob Julian, Ted Barr, Merle Mays, Jim Boyle, Harry Black. We can start just going down the line of 33rds and stuff, And, but I mean, I really looked up to Ron and Art and stuff. They really took me under their wing coming out the bat. And I would have joined Scottish Rite a lot sooner, but they chose every drill weekend I had when I was still in the National Guard for their reunions. I'm like, choose any other weekend. I can make it. But at the time I was in operations NCO, and so I could never miss drill.
Well, that stinks.
Yeah.
But at least you're there now, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I came back from Iraq, and I had 3 months of no drill, so I was like, this is what I'm joining.
There you go.
And so I was able to join with, such guys like, Scott, Mark, Scotty Scott, Terry Adsett, and a handful of others. And I was there for the infamous, bench incident and stuff where it collapsed during the degree.
Oh, no.
And, yeah.
I haven't heard about that.
Oh, that's a good story. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later.
So I did have one question. We had a fellow craft brother who, he hasn't returned to lodge in a while, but he once told me that he was excited to get his Master Mason so that he could join the Rosicrucians and learn how to shoot laser beams out of his eyes. So what degree is that?
I'm a 9th grade in the Rosicrucians, and I haven't even been taught that yet.
Haven't got there yet.
Oh, man.
Maybe that's that, maybe there's a mythical 10th, 11th, 12th, that I don't know about where you do that.
Well, there's always more that we don't know about.
Right. Yeah.
The world is convinced that we don't know. It's evil, we just aren't told.
Yeah, we're just, I always love that. I'm just a porch mason. And I'm like, okay, racist overtones aside, we'll overlook that. But no, I mean, the with the SRICF, there's obviously different Rosicrucian societies all over. You have the AMORC, the Ancient Mystic Order, the Red Cross, or the Rose Cross, out of San Jose, and I'm not, and this is nothing against them, is they've not necessarily de-Christianized it and stuff, but they've definitely focused more on the Egyptian roots of some things, looking more at the Gnostic side of, and more Eastern mysticism, without necessarily crossing into OTO or Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. But they definitely not as, I would say, as Christian as what the SRICF is. It still focuses on the Christian aspect of it, because again, you look at our history, we were founded, the legend is we were founded by a bunch of monks, and so we focus on that. And what I like though with the SRICF is, even though we're Christian based, we still accept doing research and studying other religions and philosophies of the world. In fact, the fourth grade is called Philosophus for a reason. It's the philosopher. And so you're charged to study and look at other religions of the world to better understand your relationship with God.
And I think that's one of the distinctions we have to make as well, because I got that invite from you to get in on the Zoom call when you guys were just sort of talking in general. Was it last month?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that was. And that's the one thing that I picked up on, is the amount of learning. It's like school.
Yeah.
Because they literally want you to do papers and present and do stuff where the other bodies, Scottish Rite, they're not doing that.
Yeah.
These guys are doing that. So it's like, even more uber nerdy or whatever we want to say, right? Because you're going to be committing time, and that degree is only for you.
Yeah.
It's not for anybody else and stuff like that. So that's really, when somebody's thinking about it, that's one of those big things. But it's not an open casting, right?
Right.
You can't just say, hey, I want to join, give me an application.
Right. And I will say that marks, that's a market difference from England. The SRIA, you can actually petition to join. But the way they do it, how it kind of becomes a little bit more invitational is as you move up. They get very, very closed on who can get 5, 6, 7, and then 8 and 9. Man, they close that up even harder. It's only certain officers get 9. Most everyone's an 8 if they get that at all.
Yeah.
And they're very academic. They have, and we just created an officer equivalent to them. Is we created a director of studies for the nation, and they've had one for years. And they also have, because it's England, the provincial level. And so they have provincial study groups, and then college, officers that are in charge of education. And we don't have an educational officer necessarily in our college in Idaho. That was kind of my role as celebrant, was in charge, leading ritual, but also like keeping on everybody for doing their studies. And so I created a study guide for our college, and then kind of encourage them to look at different things.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's what I loved about when I went through the Scottish Rite, was I felt like there was like a bigger educational opportunity there for myself, like self-education, like I've gone through like one of the Master Craftsman programs, but then kind of like you were saying, you were just like writing all these papers to yourself, and I just go through Morals and Dogma and just skip around and then look at other stuff and just take notes, and it's like that Masonic ADD that we all have,
Oh yeah, no. And and with us, one of the reasons I started with our college doing a lot of this stuff is we were brand new, and we had a lot of young members, and so you wanted guidance, because with our college, if one receives an invite, they're cleared all the way through 4. It's just how long that takes and stuff. And usually we want 1 degree per meeting, so one way it's not over. Just blowing your mind with too much information, and it's not overburdening the cast with having to memorize all that work. So we try to do 1 degree, maybe we'll do 2 degrees a meeting, but you might get your second, you might only get your first, and then the next meeting, third, second, and so on until you get your 4th. And from the 4th, that's when we want you to do a paper or something that benefits the college. So we had one member, he built all our regalia and stuff, because we have the altar and stuff, just like any Masonic body, and then all the pieces of equipment that go with it. We could try to go find everything online, but we have a book that told us all the dimensions and what they need to look like, and so he just built it all for us. So we gave him he got through his 7 because of that. And others have delivered, plenty of papers. I've delivered papers. In fact, I did one paper comparing the end times of Catholicism and Hinduism. So looking at that eschatology about how the world will end, and essentially looking at Revelations, and on the Hindu side, looking at the messianic character of Kalki and stuff, who was, has a lot of similarities actually to Christ in Revelations.
Yeah. Lots of similarities through all of our journeys thus far, as we're finding out, and that becomes that question for me is origination. Where all these things spring from.
Well, it also speaks to like the similarity of just like human culture, right? We all have like that one story in our mind. Like there has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
And then just the different cultures and languages over time just kind of change the characters.
Yeah. And seeing, and then, expanding from the college up to the High Council, which is the governing body of the United States, our annual meeting and stuff, it's 2 days. And if you look at Grand Lodge, that's roughly, 2 days, maybe 2.5 days, depending on if we have extra stuff. And most of it's all business all day long. With the High Council, though, we maybe do an hour here, an hour there, and maybe 2 hours Saturday morning. The rest of it's all educational papers. So we have presenters, and being from all over and seeing the SRICF High Council, we cover the United States, Canada, South Korea, Philippines, Central America, South America, Togo. That might be it. And stuff, but a very large group, of people, and a lot of people, some of them have doctorates in theology and mysticism and, all these occult studies. And some of them deliver these just mind-blowing doctorate level papers, and then some deliver some very beginner papers. And I like that you can have, both novice presenters and professional presenters at this. And 2022 High Council, I got to present on the Roman cult of Mithras, and where I went over the history of religion in ancient Rome, its development over time, and then how it incorporated as it conquered lands, how it just assimilated those religions into itself, and that's how it brought into the Orphic mysteries, and the Mithraic mysteries. And I talked about how that, and then I actually compared Mithraic mysteries with Christianity, Rosicrucianism, and Freemasonry, and I was able to present that. And then God willing and stuff, it'll be published in our magazine, the Ad Lucum. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. And that's one thing I like about our society is it gives people that avenue and stuff to really express themselves in their studies.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've only been to one Grand Lodge, but I would love a little educational bit in there.
What are you talking about?
So for us, I'll walk like this last year. I got up at 8. Had a quick breakfast, cup of coffee. We meet on the top floor of this hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, and I helped get people set up, and then I was also introduced, for an office that I held, and we do the opening procession. Then it's lunchtime, and and in that opening procession we might do some key remarks from the Supreme Magus and maybe the visiting dignitaries from England, Scotland, or Portugal. But then after lunch, it's presentations all day. And then at night, the 8th and 9th grades are conferred. And if we have any business in those grades, we do that. Next day, it's all presentations, maybe some reports if we need them approved. But with our society, most of the chief adepts who run each state, them and the 8s and 9s, they do most of the approval outside the main business meeting. So most of the work is already done. So then it's like, okay, I'm here to watch, Wayne do a paper on Buddhism, and so people are there to actually see the presenters more than they are the actual officers or any of the business portions of it. And then afterwards, usually colleges have hospitality suites, 3 to 4, depending on the year. And so then you're just spending the time, hanging out and, talking with other colleges, meeting other people. I really like that part.
Yeah. So I think that sort of wraps one of the other questions that I had too. We've talked multiple times about how the most visible of any of our groups or appendant bodies are the Shriners because of the hospitals and of course the cars and the parades and stuff like that. They're like the most visible, especially on the philanthropy edge. Scottish Rite does a ton of stuff. We know Eyes Back. York Rite does a ton of stuff. Does Rosicrucians have a philanthropy, or is there not a?
No. This, it's that weird line depending on who you ask. Some say we're not a Masonic order; we're just an order of, that happens to be all Masons.
Just an order of Masons, not a secret society, but a society with secrets.
That's right.
Same thing.
Yeah. But our focus isn't philanthropy. It is purely educational and religious studies on that side of thing, and that's why you see that requirement and stuff of we focus more towards the Christian side of things, and now that's not to say a college I guess could try to donate something, but most of the time the college is focused on is that personal growth and education.
Well, you don't have to donate. We've talked multiple times about what charity means, and Brother Chad Brown will fill your ears on what charity is and is not, and especially at our lodge, the time we spend with each other working and growing and developing the ritual, that's charity in itself. So you don't have to be...
charity just means love.
Yeah. You don't have to be a philanthropy giving money to be doing good things, because these guys, you're gonna be doing good things in your own communities, in your own, just like we sort of have here at the lodges. And
I'll do a side note. I will say I think too much when people think charity, they think that commercial charity. If I just have to donate $5, $20, $100 to this, and that's charity. It's like, no, that's just charitable giving.
Yeah.
But the Rosicrucians doesn't have a set charity for itself, But there's quite a few groups and stuff that, as you move through some of them, quite a few of them don't have it and express charity. And at that point, I think you would start, diluting the market too much, because you're also then pulling from the same people over and over and over again.
Which is
Yeah.
something huge. And diluting the market is actually a question that I had as well, because we've done some things in the past together, some work and some different kind of things, and when you were putting together this to bring it out to Idaho, was it a slam dunk, or did you have some issues? Because I know Widow Sons had tons of issues. We had issues with the Cedars, which so on and so forth. But how was your experience of trying to bring another group in?
Jim Herndon, past Grandmaster, approached me in actually 2013. Really, he started talking to me, but it took some time. And I actually didn't join until 2016 because of some of my travels. And we came back from that first meeting, and Jim Herndon looked at me and Jeremy and said, "Get my college started." And so we started planning. Well, then it was, okay, what people? Well, we didn't want to make the Rosicrucians York Rite 2.0 in Idaho.
Right.
But at the same time, it was also, we had to look at those who were reliable, that we knew could do these parts and who would have an interest initially. So we reached out to a handful of people, and then that was the hard part, is getting them to Wyoming, because that was the college where we were joining, and it was in the dead center of Wyoming, not the easiest place to get to, and they meet in January of all times and May, so it's usually still snow on the ground even then. And so once we got to a saturation point, we sat down with the leadership of Wyoming College and said we would like to pull away. They were actually willing to give us some money as a seed, but we still had to sit down and go, okay, for the founding members, this is how much it's going to be to buy all these different things. And then, then we had to look at how much we're going to set the money to for membership, for annual dues. And then it was, okay, the next big hurdle, and that was Grand Lodge recognition.
Right.
Because with York Rite bodies, our Grand Lodge, this doesn't count for any other Grand Lodges, I'll say this, but Grand Lodge of Idaho says if York Rite recognizes it, then the Grand Lodge doesn't need to give it approval. And so that's, so for all the little splinter groups off York Rite, we don't need to come to Grand Lodge for every one of those. And But Rosicrucianism is not, SRICF does not stem from York Rite. It's Master Mason is the requirement. So we had to go to Grand Lodge. Well, we were having, the issues with Widow's Son, getting recognition in Idaho, the whole fight over it's a motorcycle gang, yes. We had brought in Tall Cedars recently, so there was precedence of bringing new groups in, and we looked at talking with the Grand Master about just giving us a dispensation to then go to our High Council, and they wisely, he wisely said, no, let's wait to Grand Lodge, submit a resolution, let's amend it. Yeah. And so then that, the biggest thing was dispelling the myths and stuff and some of the rumors that came with it. And, we were very fortunate, though, that once we got that in the Grand Lodge and stuff, it actually still passed with about 95% passage. I only counted a handful of votes no.
Yeah.
So I was happy, and that was a big, big relief. After that, it was contacting the Supreme Magus of the Society, who at the time said, okay, it used to be in the past, once you got recognition, he could just throw a charter at you. Well, some recent college formations had kind of stumbled out of the blocks, so he said, no, I want to see you guys actually do the work. So we're like, we'll do the 5th grade. Only requires 3 officers, very little regalia. No, I'm not buying that. You need to do the 1st grade, full form, which requires like 14 officers.
Wow.
And he goes, and I want somebody there outside of Idaho to grade you guys. And so I'd gone to Louisville, Kentucky to get our dispensation, and he granted it, but he goes, yeah, we'll give you a charter until you actually confer this 1st grade. And so we were able to actually plan one. We planned it on the weekend of the exemplification down in Pocatello. So we talked to the Pocatello guys, got them to let us use the lodge on Sunday, and the Utah chief adept with some of his entourage came up and examined us.
Nice.
And so we brought in 2 guys that day, and within a month we had our charter. But we still had to do a lot of growing, because from November to that March, we had to build all our regalia, and luckily the brother who's our suffragan, our second in command, was willing to build all that for us. Mm-hmm. And did it all by hand, painted I'm not a good woodworker, so I was, just happy that he was able to, accomplish that for us, because there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so he got everything built for us, and then over time we've added more things that are optional, and or we've, I guess, beautified it and stuff, enhanced the quality. Most Rosicrucian colleges wear robes, but with us, I'm a bigger guy, but then we have Bill, Curtis, who's skinny. It's like, okay, trying to find a robe that's kind of a one-size-fits-all is not easy. So we went with stoles. Okay. And so we went with a gal out of promoter, Azoth Art. She does regalia for a bunch of, esoteric groups. And I said, well, can you do custom jobs? And she said, sure. So I sent her a PowerPoint, and she sent back a few adjustments, and I went, perfect, Yeah. And so I, on a few things, I upfronted the money, and then the college reimbursed. But the biggest thing for us was getting people, because we have one college for the state of Idaho. So we're pulling people from Hayden, and then we even have a member that lives in Salt Lake. Mm-hmm. And so trying to pull everyone together in one spot for one day, it's like, okay, we got to make this worth your while.
So how's the meeting, now that it's all together, what's the meeting structure like? Do you guys meet like once every 6 months? Do you meet,
we meet once a quarter,
okay,
or we try to. Some years, obviously, depending on with COVID and stuff, that gets hampered. Mm-hmm. But we try to meet once a quarter, nearer on the solstices and equinoxes, and we actually have a meditative period before the meeting. So if you don't want to take part in that, go outside, go downstairs. It's a quiet area. You'll actually get yelled at, if you interrupt it. And then we start the meeting, and depending on what we have to do, we usually start with the higher grade, and then go to the lower one. So that way, when we finish it at that one, we can go to business and everyone's in the room can take part, because we can do business on the lowest grade. And so we'll confer the grades, do the lectures, everything with that. Sometimes we'll also have a paper to present. And then once a year, we have to do a collation dinner. And so that's usually just a big dinner for us to put together where we also have a presenter. And, in the past, and I'm sure we're going to keep doing this, is we try to put it on days where we have other groups. So what we try to do is we'll put the Rosicrucians in the morning where we know, let's say you're not a member of the Red Cross of Constantine or Knights of St. Thomas, is then you can leave and you have the rest of the day to yourself. And the guys that were members of Rosicrucians didn't have to get up super early and could drive in. And then there's a few of us that we have to be there the entire day. And so for some it's a very long day, for some it's a very short day, but we try to pack it to where if you're coming, it's going to be worth your while.
And does the location rotate on the quarterly meetings, or is it always in the same place?
So we've usually been doing them in Jerome at the Twin Falls Lodge location, because it's kind of the central point. But ultimately, it's up to the chief adept where we meet. So with Jim Herndon, he liked to keep it on that side of the state, simply because at his age, he didn't want to drive very far.
Right.
And I don't blame him. Now that Jeremy's taken over as chief adept, it's ultimately up to him where we're going to travel.
So it's not a state of Ada thing?
No, and that was actually it. So, and I will say that was, kind of looking back, that was one hiccup we had.
Yeah.
We had 2 members out of Idaho Falls that were unwilling to join our college and still are a member of Wyoming because it could possibly meet in Boise. They didn't want to join. They said, well, it could also meet in Idaho Falls. And he said, nope. And at first I was kind of bitter about it, and I'm like, no, what? That's his, he's still, we still send him invites and stuff. He's still welcome to come to our college as a visitor. But we definitely ran into that state of Ada versus Idaho politics and stuff. And the Northern Idaho guys we feel bad with, it's very hard for us to try to justify to go up there, where it's one guy we're going up there for versus we have to drag 17 other people up there.
I don't think you've really got that experience yet. You've heard us talk about it, but you haven't yet. You're still fresh enough into it. We just have 2 years now that you really haven't. But there's been some.
That's silly.
Yeah, I mean, it can be silly. I mean, it's hard because Idaho, we have such a concentration of membership in the Ada County, Treasure Valley area.
Right.
And the outer regions, they kind of feel disenfranchised sometimes because, it's like, why should we come all the way out there when we're all here? And then there's the fight, is it farther to travel to Idaho Falls or to Boise? It's like, well, it's the same distance, but not when you ask them. Yeah. But it's one of those we have to try to balance things. And I think our Grand Lodge tries to do that when we move around. Yeah. And with SRICF, we chose Jerome because it seemed to be the middle ground. It was also the closest location to our secretary, who has all our regalia.
It's important.
And it was just, about equidistant because, Jim had to drive, depending if he was in Salmon or, in Blackfoot and stuff. He had a few hours to drive, but I was 3 hours. I usually stayed the night in Twin and then made my way up for the day.
So rolling back out into some of the other stuff, did you want to ask him that bacon question? You had a bacon question?
Yeah, you just mentioned it. In some of my readings, I've kind of come across that Francis Bacon was probably, a participant or a writer of some of those papers. And I've read bits and pieces of the 3 articles you mentioned earlier. But what do you know about or think about his possible connection?
There's a likelihood. I think it's very likely he was a Rosicrucian.
Yeah.
He was obviously very involved with English society and obviously a lot of English esotericism. It's hard, though, to really pinpoint it without having documentation. But at that time, it's so hard to find anything. I think it's unlikely that he wrote any of the Rosicrucian manifestos and stuff. I think Andre and stuff, the Lutheran theologian, he did admit to writing a 3rd one, and I think his little circle in Germany and stuff at the university and stuff, I think a lot of them, I think that's where everything's centered from. but did he? I mean, he wrote plenty of other things and stuff that has Rosicrucian characteristics and to it. With looking at how he wrote about America, and obviously there's the theory he was Shakespeare and stuff, which has some Rosicrucian symbolism in the plays, and which I always love those conspiracies and stuff, which I can't say they're not true, but I can't say they are.
You read the what was her first name? Hall's widow,
Mary Hall.
Yeah, have you read her piece on the Bruton Vault in Virginia? It's supposed to have the manuscripts there.
Yeah.
And she's Hall's widow, and in this book, Bryce let me borrow it, she talked about how she knows that they killed him because of the different things that happened to Manly P. Hall, and then she goes on to talk about this whole thing, and her argument in there about Bacon being Shakespeare actually convinced me. I mean, I've been teaching for years and love Shakespeare all my life, and I'm looking at the evidence against him. I'm like, oh wow, that sort of makes sense. I'm like, huh, okay. So I started trying to do that myself, of looking at the plays and what's the theme and what's the element, not work in progress.
Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, I haven't looked into that aspect of it and stuff, and if he was. I mean, that was centuries ago. I mean, but. Francis Bacon obviously was influenced heavily by people like John Dee and stuff, who, not necessarily was a Rosicrucian, but was a very, heavy occultist and stuff. I mean, obviously he wrote greatly on Enochian magic and and the angels, and the side note and stuff. I mean, he signed everything with 007. And stuff. If you look at, it's a weird 7, but I mean, it's still, that's where Ian Fleming pulled 007 from. And stuff was John Dee, because he was the spy master for Elizabeth. Yeah.
That's crazy. All kinds of stuff to look into after this one, right?
Oh, yeah. Tons of information.
Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on the end here. Do you have any other questions for?
No, is there any other, or maybe what's the most outlandish thing that you've heard that you guys have done or you're responsible for? That's not just all Masons. Is there anything in particular that...
my favorite one, especially because, it's just in recent years, it's relevant, is that the Rosicrucians built the Georgia Guidestones. And stuff, which were blown up by conspiracy theorists and stuff, because it wasn't a CRC, it was like a RCR, it was a shadow society that funded everything and put up these things about reducing, the population to 500 million. And I'm like, I wish we had that money to put up those stuff, but I will say this, 2018, I flew into Atlanta and I was working down in Macon, Georgia, but I had a good chunk of the day off. I actually drove 4 hours and stuff to the Georgia Guidestones, so I actually have pictures of myself at the Guidestones and stuff before they were destroyed.
Before the explosions there.
Yeah, I was like, and I post on Facebook, I'm like, what kind of Mason and Rosicrucian would I be if I didn't come see the Guidestones?
Well, and that stuff too, that's where it gets a little dangerous. And we've always had, just here locally, at the old building in downtown Boise, lady throwing holy water on the building. We get people coming in asking about salvation, and then when it goes to that extreme of blowing stuff up, sometimes it's like,
I got threatened quite a bit
and
stuff by various Masons, and someone like, I'm gonna come put you in your place. I'm like, I'm on the road a lot, so good luck finding me. But I am. Like, thanks for the heads up, and mark that.
They just not like the dialogue, or what?
Well, most of them, they just don't like being told they're wrong.
Oh,
and then of course, then it's like, well, you're a Satanist. Well, I'm actually a Christian. No, you're a fake Christian. I'm like, okay, thank you for defining my faith with God, but okay, like, I'm sure that matters.
Yeah,
they know best.
Yeah, they do.
They always do.
And of course, they know more than me because I'm just too low level. Exactly. Without them ever taking a degree.
See, you're getting it all now. See,
you
know what to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, they're like, well, my grandfather was a Mason. I'm like, oh, that's great. Got it through osmosis, huh?
Yeah.
And they don't like that.
Yeah.
So then I get called smart ass and all sorts of fun names.
Oh, hey,
Yeah,
somebody's got to do it.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Are there, before we go, specific books or websites that you would send people to if they want to find out some more good knowledge about Rosicrucians? I mean,
There's some good books. I'll say one author and stuff particularly that has a good understanding of Rosicrucianism, not necessarily the SRICF, but Rosicrucianism in general, is Christopher McIntosh. He has a book called The Rosicrucians, where he goes over the history of it. Then he also has a book, the Rosicrucian Trilogy, where it's a modern translation of the three manifestos. And him and his wife and another scholar actually go back to the original documents and brought it to modern English rather than translating it from another translation from another translation.
nice.
So
That's nice. Because, yeah, when I've tried to read through them,
they can be rough.
yeah.
And shameless plug for your website.
Yes. So for those interested, I would please come to my website, travelingtemplar.com. Yeah, it's going on 14 years.
Yeah.
So
We'll definitely make sure to put the link
Yeah.
in these when it comes out on those, up
yeah.
there.
I should probably make an announcement about this one.
Oh, yeah. Put it up
definitely.
so they can see
That's a
it.
great one.
Yeah. So this book that I read that first little bit from is Rosalind, A History of the Guilds, the Masons, and the Rosicross by Robert Bryden. And yeah, my mom picked it up just right at Rosalind Chapel when she was there just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that might be some kind of online, or you might be able to get, it's probably not just something that they sell over there. I was looking at the back and just to see if there was an ISBN or whatever, but I'm sure that people can find it out. So
If not, I have friends over there. Be like, go get this for me.
Yeah, there we
I'm
go.
shocked that you would have friends all over the place.
Yes.
This guy's never home.
No, 211 days on the road in 2022 and 190 last year.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
See, he's the person that when these new EAs drop out because they just don't have the time, this is the
Look at
guy.
him. Yeah.
Like, you ain't got the time? What do you got going on?
That's right.
That's
Well,
funny.
we appreciate the time
Well, thank you for having
today
me.
and great information. And hopefully, we get some people coming in and commenting and stuff like that. We can send them your way, at least send them to the site because you got the years cataloged there, so you can look through all the episodes to put that forward.
And I do have a Traveling Templar Facebook group.
Yeah.
So, if they can't get me on the website, they can get me there.
Yeah,
Cool.
awesome.
So,
All right. Well, anything else, Brother Wayne?
Nope, just besides the fact of reminding everybody ad nauseum where we are.
that's right.
Of course. Well, thank you, Brother Barry from Traveling Templar, for coming and visiting us on Templar on the Run, which is the name you can find us at on Spotify, on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram is Temp on the Run, but all this other stuff here, Templar on the Run. If you got questions, you can email us at templarontherun@gmail.com, or put it on any of our socials. But yeah, we'll have this out soon and keep on rolling.
Yes. Appreciate the time.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to Templar on the Run. Please check us out at Twitter and Reddit at Templar on the Run. Our Instagram is at Temp on the Run. We got TikTok at Templar on the Run. And if you have any questions or anything else that you can't reach us on any of those other platforms, please send them to templarontherun@gmail.com. We thank you for listening and have a great day.